The town crier had one voice, one town square, and one chance to get it right, and people trusted him. YouTube has 3 billion voices, infinite reach, and a search bar that can fact-check almost anything in seconds, and people trust it less. That's the contradiction we're solving today. Why did less access to information often mean more trust in it? And what does that tell us about the platforms we use every day? If you could only trust one source of information for the rest of your life, would you want it to be slow and human, or instant and automatic? That question sits at the center of a problem every society on Earth has had to solve. How do you take something one person knows and turn it into something an entire community knows, accurately, before it stops being useful? This sounds simple, but it never has been. Information breaks down the moment it starts moving. People forget details. They exaggerate. They repeat things wrong, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. The farther a message travels, the more chances it has to get twisted. For most of human history, this wasn't a small inconvenience. Most people couldn't read. There was no way to check a fact for yourself. If you didn't hear something directly, you had to trust that whoever told you got it right. Today, the problem looks completely different, but it hasn't gone away. We're not short on information anymore. We're drowning in it. Anyone can publish anything, instantly, to anyone. The challenge isn't getting information to spread. It's figuring out which version of it to believe. Two systems, centuries apart, both had to face this same problem. One used a man with a bell. The other uses a global algorithm. Let's see how each one tried to solve it. Long before newspapers, before printing presses, before anyone imagined a device that could put a message in front of 1 million people at once, towns solved this problem with a person. He was called a town crier, and he wasn't just someone with a loud voice. In many English towns, he was a sworn official, appointed by the mayor or a local lord. That detail matters more than it seems. His authority didn't come from how convincing he sounded. It came from the fact that the town itself had put him in that position. When he spoke, he wasn't sharing his own opinion. He was speaking for the town government. Before he said a word, he rang a bell or shouted a phrase that's still recognized today. Oyez, 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 from an old Anglo-Norman word meaning hear ye. This wasn't decoration. It was a signal, a way of telling everyone nearby that what came next wasn't gossip or rumor. It was official. Criers worked from fixed locations, usually the market cross or the town square, the same spot people already gathered to trade goods and exchange news. Over time, that location itself became part of the message. People knew where to go if they wanted real information, not secondhand chatter. This system also protected itself. In parts of English history, harming a town crier while he was performing his duty could be treated as a serious offense against the authority he represented, not just an attack on an individual. The reasoning was straightforward. If people could threaten or silence the crier, they could threaten the flow of official information itself. Protecting him was a way of protecting the system. During real emergencies, this mattered enormously. In moments like the Great Fire of London in 1666, or during outbreaks of plague, criers were used to pass along urgent instructions, evacuation orders, warnings, and updates that people needed immediately. This wasn't entertainment or civic tradition for its own sake. It was survival infrastructure. What's easy to miss is that the town crier system wasn't built for speed. A single voice in a square could only reach so many people, so many times a day. What it was built for was trust. Because the crier was appointed, because his announcements followed a recognizable ritual, and because the law itself backed him up, people didn't have to guess whether what he said was true. The verification happened before he ever opened his mouth. That system worked well for a town of a few hundred people. It could never work for a planet of 8 billion. So what happens when a society tries to solve the exact same problem, but at a scale no crier could ever reach? If a town crier's trust came from being appointed by someone in power, where does trust come from on a platform like YouTube, where literally anyone can start talking without asking permission from anybody? The honest answer is that it doesn't come from appointment at all. It comes from something closer to a popularity contest, run by a machine. There's no mayor deciding who gets to speak. Instead, YouTube uses an algorithm that tracks how people respond to a video, how long they watch, whether they click, whether they comment, whether they keep watching that creator's other videos. Based on those signals, the platform decides which videos get shown to more people and which ones quietly disappear. In other words, The audience's behavior does the job that a mayor's appointment used to do. Nobody grants you an audience in advance. You have to earn one, video by video, based on how people react after you've already spoken. This creates a very different kind of Oyez. Instead of a bell and a phrase everyone recognizes as official, creators use titles and thumbnails to interrupt the scroll and grab attention in the first second or two. It serves a similar function, stopping people and telling them something worth their attention is coming. But it's competing against millions of other creators doing the exact same thing at the exact same moment. Because there's no official gatekeeper checking facts before a video goes live, the system relies on other signals instead. Comments, likes, a channel's upload history, whether a creator has built an audience over time. These act as a rough, decentralized substitute for the kind of institutional vetting a crier had built in from the start. It's messy, and it's far less reliable, but it's also flexible in a way the old system never could be. This points to a real structural difference, not just a change in technology. With the town crier, authority came first and speech came second. He was trusted, and then he spoke. With YouTube, speech comes first and authority, if it comes at all, gets built afterward, through views, subscribers, and repeated interaction with an audience. Trust isn't granted anymore. It's assembled after the fact, and it can be lost just as easily as it was gained. What YouTube solved, and solved incredibly well, is scale. A single creator can reach more people in one afternoon than every town crier in history combined. But solving scale meant giving up the built-in trust mechanism that made the crier system work in the first place. There's no equivalent to a legal penalty for spreading false information the way there once was for harming or impersonating an official crier. The protection that used to sit on the side of the messenger simply isn't there anymore. So now we have two systems that were built to solve the exact same problem, but they ended up almost opposite in how they work. One says, prove your trustworthiness first, then you're allowed to speak. The other says, speak first, and trustworthiness gets sorted out later, if it ever does. Put side by side, the differences and similarities between them start to reveal something bigger about how information itself behaves once it starts to move. Strip away the bell and the algorithm, and these two systems are built from the same basic parts. Every information system, whether it's a person shouting in a square or a piece of software recommending videos to millions, needs to answer 4 questions. Who gets to speak? How anyone knows what they're saying is true? How the message actually reaches people? And how the system finds out whether the message landed the way it was supposed to. For the town crier, those answers were simple and fixed. A mayor decided who spoke. A legal oath backed up what was said. The message traveled through a person standing in a physical location. And feedback came instantly, in the form of a crowd standing right there, reacting in real time. For YouTube, every one of those answers is different. Almost anyone can decide to speak. What counts as trustworthy gets worked out through crowd behavior and algorithmic signals, not an oath. The message travels through code, recommending videos to screens all over the world. And feedback doesn't come from a crowd's face, it comes from numbers, views, likes, comments, arriving slowly and getting measured after the fact. So these aren't just an old version and a new version of the same idea. They're two different architectures built to solve the same underlying problem. And yet, despite 600 years in technology neither system's creators could have imagined, some things showed up in both anyway. Both rely on a signal that interrupts people's attention before the real message starts, whether that's a bell and a shouted phrase, or a thumbnail and a title designed to stop a scroll. Both depend on a recognizable identity that audiences learn to trust over repeated exposure, a familiar crier in a familiar square, or a familiar creator with a familiar channel. Both put the most important information first, because both systems learned, independently, that people's attention doesn't last long enough to bury the point. And both rely on a kind of home territory, a market square where the crier is known, or a niche and subscriber base where a creator's audience already expects to hear from them. None of this was copied from one system to the other. It shows up in both because, apparently, there's no other way to solve this particular problem well. But the differences matter just as much, and they shouldn't be smoothed over to make the comparison feel neater than it actually is. A town crier was one identifiable person. If he lied or made a mistake, everyone knew exactly who to blame. and there were real legal consequences attached to that responsibility. Modern platforms spread accountability across millions of creators, many of whom nobody can easily identify or hold to account. The Crier system also had built-in scarcity working in its favor. There was one Crier, so there wasn't a second version of the story competing for belief. Today there are millions of competing versions of almost every story, which creates a kind of confusion the old system never had to deal with, simply because it never could have existed at that scale. And there's a legal gap worth naming directly. Criers were protected, and interfering with their duty carried real consequences, because the law understood that protecting the messenger meant protecting the flow of official information. There's no clear equivalent of that protection for creators today. That's not a small stylistic difference. It's a genuine gap in how modern systems are built. Put together, these two systems reveal something that goes beyond either one individually. Reach and built-in trust seem to move in opposite directions. The wider a message needs to travel, the harder it becomes to verify it at the source before it spreads. Small, local systems can enforce trust directly because everyone involved is close enough to check. Large systems can't do that, so they build looser, messier substitutes instead. A crowd's engagement, an algorithm's signals, a creator's track record. This isn't unique to town criers or to YouTube. It shows up anytime a society finds a new way to make communication travel farther than it used to, which leads to the actual shift worth noticing. In the age of the town crier, verification happened before a message ever reached the public. Someone had already checked, so the audience didn't have to. Today, that step has largely moved. The audience is the one doing the checking now, often after the message has already spread. The tools changed completely, from a bell in a market square to a global network of screens, but the responsibility of separating what's accurate from what merely sounds convincing didn't disappear. It just moved from the person appointed to speak to the person deciding what to believe. So maybe the real question isn't whether to trust the slow human voice or the instant algorithmic one. It's whether you've actually taken on the job that a mayor, a crier's oath, or an editor used to do for you. Because that job didn't disappear. It just landed on you. So here's what I want to know. In your own life, what's your personal town crier? The one source you trust enough not to double check? And be honest, have you actually earned that trust or just gotten used to it? Let me know in the comments.